Thank you. Good evening. Please sit down. Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, Her Excellency Ma Keqing of the People's Republic of China, His Excellency Menacher Baron, Ambassador of Israel, members of the Cabinet present, Secretaries Domingo, Llamas, and Acosta, of course, Senator Lacson, whose vote I'm not courting tonight, perhaps in the next elections. My age bracket members, Jeffrey Nang, George C., my senior in college, Mr. Roy Chua, members of the House of Representatives, Deputy Speaker Renzo Tañada III, and Representative Sani Angara, former Representative Risa Ontiveros Barquel, officers, investors, members, and staff of the Association of Young Filipino Chinese Entrepreneurs, local government officials present, honored guests, and I think I would be amiss if I don't acknowledge the also young, like Mr. Fred Yao, Mr. Willie Tan, Mr. Alfonso Uy, of course the youngest, Mr. Tan Ching, and I'm sorry, this is the penultimate youngest, Mr. Attorney Mike Barela. Anyway, good evening. During my younger days in Boston, an uncle of mine, Ricardo Baby Lopa, regaled me with stories about his studies in Wharton. One of his professors made it a point to remind his students that if at times they think they are superior in any way to those who came before them, to please remember that they stood on the shoulders of giants. As some of you might know, this is a variation of a quote attributed to Sir Isaac Newton, and it held true in the 17th century as it held true for my uncle's time, and it holds true for us now. Progress is always built on the foundations laid down by those who came before us. Today, we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Anvil Business Club. Over the years, we have seen newer, younger sets of leaders in the business community stepping up to the plate. As you begin another year, you build on the achievements of the great men and women who came before you. Anvil's rise comes at a very interesting time, as many of you here begin to take the reins as captains and lieutenants of industry. The way we view the world, and along with it, the way we do business, is indeed changing. Overseas, we continue to see people seeking to change unjust systems, where a select few profited at the expense of other sectors of society. We hear calls for the return of responsible regulation, calls to bridge the widening gap between rich and poor, and calls to protect the public from the sometimes abusive practices of a powerful few. In many places, this has caused social and political unrest. Questions have been asked with raised voices and sometimes even with raised fists. It remains to be seen how smooth the transition will be from the old system to a new, more thoughtful, more enlightened way of approaching things. This is the context in which we find ourselves, a society in flux in whatever industry you may be from, and in whichever country, the challenge is the same: to think on your feet, to keep nimble, and to adapt to changing paradigms. Our country has avoided getting directly hit by the global economic slowdown, but this does not mean that we are immune to its root causes. The Philippine business community is no stranger to similar disputes on the issue of equality, specifically between that of management and labor. For instance, in a small bakery with 2 employees, overtime is such a simple thing to agree on. Can anyone here imagine as easy a time in a multi-thousand employee bakery factory? The truth is, as companies grow, management becomes more concerned with profit, while labor demands higher wages and more benefits. Such seemingly disparate interests breed tension and often places the two sides on a collision course. But this tension, in fact, is unnecessary. No one can argue that both sides working towards a common goal greatly enhances the chances of success. The idea that management and labor are always on opposing sides of the table creates a needless dichotomy, which stunts the progress of individual enterprises and, in effect, the greater economy. The central issue today is how both demands can be met in a reasonable way. Workers are too often seen as mere factors of production and obstacles to greater profit. But a company's success is tied to efficiencies that make it more competitive. And one of the keys to competitiveness is a more motivated workforce. Keeping workers at the subsistence level lowers your workers' morale and thus limits the growth of your business. And it follows that a consumer who is kept on mere subsistence mode cannot be a source of growth within the greater economy. It is therefore clear that individual growth is tied to everybody's growth, and that insisting on old paradigms only leaves companies vulnerable to losing market share to more efficient companies. When I was in Congress, I filed a bill that, in general terms, would require companies to share 10% of their profits with their workers once profits on an annual basis grew. The vision behind this measure was exactly that, to find some common ground between the interests of management and labor. What is emphasized is that the relationship between management and labor should not be a zero-sum game, where the gains of one side come at the expense of the other. It does not have to be that way, and that is the challenge we are all working to address right now. As the Chief Executive Officer of your government, I have worked to instill this idea in the bureaucracy. When one compares salaries between the public and private sectors here in the Philippines, one would see that government salaries are indeed very competitive on the entry level. But as one rises through the ranks in government, the salaries begin to pale in comparison to those for equivalent positions in the private sector. This country's progress relies heavily on those working for its government, and the government has to be able to attract and reward the greatest minds in this country. This is why I've taken the first steps towards more competitive compensation and rewards for the 1.6 million people in our bureaucracy. In December of 2011, I signed Administrative Order 25, which created an interagency task force to propose, among others, a results-based performance management system, which will be used to determine incentives for government workers based on their individual and collective performance. Under the leadership of the Department of Budget and Management, the Department of Finance, and other agencies in this task force, they have been working on a proposal which obviously needs a lot of study. I stand here today as president of this country and also as your fellow leader of an institution, your fellow decision maker, and your fellow implementer of a vision. That is a vision that we all should share, not growth merely for the few at the top, but for everyone who has a stake in our enterprise. This is the new way of thinking that can guarantee not merely our survival, but our collective progress. Inclusiveness is the value that will allow us to build on the momentum we have already gained over the past 21 months. It is the bedrock principle behind our efforts to create a level playing field, to establish reforms in all branches of government, and to focus our budget on sectors and programs that have the greatest impact on those, especially in the margins. Take, for example, our conditional cash transfer program, which has in the past year given 2.3 million Filipino families the resources they need to get by, so long as they attend regular health checkups and send their children to school. These CCTS aren't just about plugging the leaks. They are effectively investments in our people's future. We are ensuring that children today are equipped with the necessary skills to be part of tomorrow's workforce. Furthermore, the CCTS empower the 2.3 million beneficiary families as consumers. By giving them spending power, they participate in the real economy and play a part in its growth. By leaving no one behind, we are enabling every Filipino to pull their own weight on this path to progress. Our target this year is to provide conditional cash transfers to 3 million families, and I am very pleased to announce that as of last week, we are well ahead of that target, having already registered 3,029,890 households in the program. Ultimately, the key to advancement lies in transforming the you win, I lose view of doing business to one of communal and inclusive growth. This has been a challenging task, and even though we have done a lot over the past year and a half, much more remains to be done. Even before I ran for the presidency, I knew the weight of the problems of this country. I knew how much work was required to turn the Philippines around. But still, I chose to answer the call of our people. I did not want to look back at these years and say that I could have done much more, yet chose to do nothing. So please, let us work together. Government and private sector, we are on the road to becoming one of the world's more successful economies. HSBC recently predicted that by the year 2050, we will be the 16th largest economy in the world. Of course, this is still a long way off. But 2 years ago, how many people imagined that we would be receiving such distinctions? How many people thought that when agencies like the Japanese JETRO agency surveyed Japanese firms in Asia and Oceania, that their conclusions would say that we have significant advantages as far as cost of doing business, the supply and quality of labor, and employee salaries compared to other countries in the region, making us, in fact, the #1 business destination in Asia, whether in the manufacturing or service sectors. On a more local basis, who could have imagined 2 years ago that our stock market will have set record highs 21 times in as many months in office as this administration has? Just today, it closed at 5,145.89. I would like it to grow bigger with more record highs than my months in service, and I think that is very possible. This is just the start. Management has the vision and the resources. Workers have the wherewithal to use those resources and make that vision a reality. Imagine what heights we can soar to if management and labor can propel each other upward by truly working together. Make no mistake, we are on the threshold of transforming this country, our society, and the lives of our people. We can, and we have already been doing it. The challenge before us is to accelerate this transformation further. Together, it will be done. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much, His Excellency, for the inspiring message.